in double overtime to 10th seeded Virginia just a few hours ago in Carver Hawkeye Arena. And to talk about it, we got the Cedar Rapids Gazette's Madison Hricik on the show, along with 247 Sports' David Eickholt. Guys, final score, Virginia 83, Iowa 75. Double overtime to cap off two kind of underwhelming performances for the Hawkeyes. You guys are coming from the game. There's not many combined hours of sleep here on this stage. Madison, let's start with you. What did you see from the Hawkeyes that prevented them from beating a team like Virginia that they should have beaten?
You know, I think the first thing that I noticed was every quarter in that game, including those two overtime periods, were different. There was not a sense of consistency that prolonged Iowa to be able to do what Iowa has done very well throughout this season. And I really noticed it in the first half. It became glaringly obvious during that second overtime period where Iowa they weren't getting the shots that they needed. They weren't getting the good shots to fall. And most devastatingly, they weren't able to convert at the free throw line. And that's where UVA really took over and was able to come out with that upset win. Yeah,
David, similar question. This is a Hawkeye team that usually shoots it quite well from all over the floor, especially at the free throw line. The inconsistency really hurt them today.
No, it did. And it was one of those things where I really never felt like Iowa was in danger until Chit-Chat Wright went 2 of 4 from the free throw line following, which, by the way, that overtime felt like it was at least 45 minutes between all the reviews that were going on. But I think it's glaringly obvious. We knew this team had holes. I still think it was a successful year for Jan Jensen. I think it's hard to really argue otherwise, but there's such an emphasis on the NCAA tournament and advancing, especially now when you look at the men who are now in the Sweet 16. But the thing is also, remember a few years ago during Caitlin Clark's sophomore year, they got upset by a 10 seed as well. Yeah. And then we saw what happened after that. Now I think the expectations to move forward in that regard are a little bit ridiculous, but I think it's very obvious that Iowa needs to attack the transfer portal. They have to get some outside shooting. I mean, they made, I think, 6 of 43 from the three-point line over the last 2 games. That's not going to get done. And credit Virginia. I mean, they're a deep team. They barely qualified, but remember, it's not the fact that they won 3 games in Iowa City. They also had an overtime game against Georgia. So they've put more miles and more minutes than anybody in the NCAA tournament so far. So you return a lot of key pieces. It's a rough end for Hannah Stuelke, but I'd still like to believe that Iowa is closer rather than farther away.
Yeah, let's take just a quick look at numbers. 5 of 29 from behind the three-point line. That's not going to cut it. Iowa took 84 shots and only made 31 of them. Compare that to Virginia, who they went 28 out of 63, about 44.4% from the field. Obviously, Iowa got a lot more chances, but they were a lot less efficient. We'll break down a little bit more of each overtime period later on in our Web Extra, but let's talk about some of the positives from this weekend. And it's got to start with the biggest MVP of the season in Ava Hayden, who had 29 points against Fairleigh Dickinson, 26 against Virginia, a game where she fouled out. File footage from the year. She's had an incredible year, and she's remained dominant even through the NCAA tournament. I know Fairleigh Dickinson is not Ohio State, for example, but they're still a very good team. They won their conference tournament, and Ava Hayden just dominated against them.
We've talked about it so many times on just how much of a step she's taken throughout this season. Ever since that Big Ten tournament last year, she's an entirely different player, both just in how she plays the game, but also how she holds herself when she's on the court. I had a chance to talk with her just a little bit post-game, and I had asked her, I said, what's the thing you're most proud of about how you've performed this season? And she was like, it's my confidence, the fact that I feel like I have noticed the growth that I've had and the ability to step up when I need to, and she wants to continue to progress that. So I think that's definitely a positive to take away for sure.
David, your thoughts?
Do you guys remember those old Dos Equis commercials where it was like the most interesting man in the world?
Sure.
Ava Hayden might be the most interesting woman in the world. And I mean it from this extent. She's very logically and statistically based, but I think over the last month, especially when Taylor McCabe got injured, she became an emotional leader. And I think that's where you kind of look at that growth and you look at this heartbreak and you look ahead to the future with Ava and you think, she just is going to understand it. She's going to take a big step forward in that emotional leadership, in that vocal leadership next season. This is a girl who I got the chance to catch up with her a little bit one-on-one this week. She wanted a physics book for Christmas when Jan Jensen was recruiting her, because that's the way she's wired. When she sees a concept and she can conceptualize it, she understands it. And what's the most impressive thing about Ava Hayen? It's her positioning. She wins the battle of the possession before she even gets the basketball and puts it in. So I think for Ava, she had sky-high expectations in terms of moving forward and taking a step forward. It's so difficult when all that pressure's on your shoulder to exceed those expectations. And now you look at the lineage of great Iowa post players. I said it a couple weeks ago, I said it a month ago, Ava Hayen's going to be the next step forward, and I think this heartbreak could be the most important thing for her, development as far as not just on the court, but being that go-to emotional leader, that vocal leader, and, take away from what she calls a very straight-faced personality. Yeah. When she gets a big and one, you guys are on the sidelines. It's far from straight-faced.
Yeah, Ava Hayen, part of that sophomore class that if they stay at Iowa, they could accomplish some great things. On the other side, you have some seniors. Kylie Feuerbach was one of them, and Hannah Stolke is a name we're going to remember in Eastern Iowa for a very long time. She had 2 really good performances, 2 double-doubles. I know you guys spoke with her in the locker room a little bit. She left it all out there. 19 rebounds in a double-double with 48 and a half minutes played. Stolke really leaving her mark in Iowa City.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really stood out about her more than anything else is we've talked about how much she cares about this program and how much heart and joy she has to be able to play for Iowa. She was fighting through tears, and it was very obvious how much it hurt for her to leave Carver Hawkeye Arena, and yet she was there signing hats, signing T-shirts, towels to everybody that was over by the tunnel because she cares that much. And that just speaks volumes to me about who she is as a person and what it's meant for her to be able to play at Iowa, just to take a moment for herself and have those emotions, but still, be around for the fan base too.
I think she's going to go down as one of the more underappreciated Hawkeyes and more underrated Hawkeyes, because you got to look at her journey through her career. She had to play an undersized 5 against some elite post players like Camila Cardoso. Look, I'm a decently tall guy. I had to look up to her when I interviewed her a couple of years ago at the Final Four. I can't imagine defending her in the post, and Hannah Stolke did that. She shined. They've asked so many different roles of her. She's an elite athlete. She's a phenomenal ambassador for the program. Statistically, she's going to be up there with the very best of the best. She's going to keep track of the program, and I'm very interested to see how she transitions to the WNBA. But look at her passing development this season compared to the first couple of years, breaking the press with her dribbling ability, moving from that 4 and 5 hybrid. I think over the last 2 months, you really saw her game take a step forward, not just in terms of, the production's one thing, she's always had that, but just to carry the emotional toll of being a senior leader on, again, a 9 freshman, sophomore riddled team.
Yeah, talk men's basketball in Tampa coming up next on Iowa Live.
Trey, what is the importance of strengthening and conditioning at the high school level?
So I would say there's 3 main points, the first one being injury prevention. So we are training these
Welcome back. We're joined by Trey from Elite Fitness. Trey, what is the importance of strengthening and conditioning at the high school level?
So I would say there's 3 main points, the first one being injury prevention. So we are training these kids to be strong enough and mobile enough so that they are ready to handle anything they might encounter in their sports. The second would be to improve their sport performance. So we're trying to make them stronger, faster, more explosive. So that's going to help them run faster, jump higher, jump farther, react quicker, and that's just going to improve their sport performance. And then the last one is just to help build these healthy lifelong habits. So we're teaching them how to lift with appropriate form and how to train safely.
At what age should kids begin training, and is there such a thing as training too young?
I would say that there's no such thing as training too young if it is done appropriately. So the good thing about working with any of our trainers here at Elite Fitness is that we are knowledgeable enough and have enough experience to give the kids appropriate exercises no matter what developmental stage they're in.
Well, how can people get a hold of you?
People can get a hold of us by going to our website at elitefitnessiowa.com.
All right, welcome back to Pickle Palace, everybody. Happier times are ahead as we talk about the Iowa men's basketball team. For more on the women, stay tuned if you are on streaming or on the KCRG app or the KCRG YouTube page. All right, Iowa beats Clemson 67-61, and then they play and beat Florida in what is essentially a road game. Hawkeyes 73, Gators 72, and one of the most legendary shots we have ever seen covering Iowa in the last however many years we've combined to do it. One of the most legendary shots we've ever seen. It's Alvaro Folgueras from the corner for 3. How surprised, Madison, were you were at that game, that they drew up a transition 3, not a 2. A 2 would tie it, and they do it for Folgueras, who's not the go-to guy like Sturtz is.
Well, so what was interesting about it was the initial plan was to give the ball to Sturtz and get him to go downhill. And then Florida's counter move was to try and foul Sturtz, get him to the line. And what ended up happening was that the defense just basically collapsed on Sturtz like they had all game. Folgueras had kind of motioned over towards Sturtz before the inbound and was like, hey, if I'm open, I'm going to make it. And Sturtz took him up on it. And it was, I mean, just sitting courtside and just hearing the stadium erupt, basically. I mean, it was a road environment, but it was so many people were just absolutely stunned, including myself. It was one heck of a clutch shot. I mean, that was such a fun moment. And to see him embrace his mom afterwards when the game ended was just the cherry on top as well.
David, it doesn't matter who you're a fan of. When you see something legendary, you know it right away.
People have been missing the glass slipper in this year's tournament, right? Alex, I mean, like the high point upsetting Wisconsin is one thing, but it's been very interesting watching Iowa go from like the enemy in these marquee matchups to being like America's team in this sense. Like, do you know how many people were happy when Iowa football just blitzed Diego Pavia and put him in the dirt 3 or 4 times? I think everybody was rejoicing over that. It felt the same way with this Florida team. This Florida team, I've quickly learned, was not well liked nationally, but for Folgueras being the wild card all year long, the emotional wild card, if he plays well, the team plays well. To get his 4th foul with 12 minutes to go, it would have broken him 2 months ago. But for him to go back out there, not foul, make a great bounce pass to a cutting Tavion Banks when they're down 3 and needed a bucket, and then to line up in the quarter and bury that, it's just a big full circle moment, and I think you saw the emotion on his face when he was embracing Ben McCollum postgame too. But what a year for Ben McCollum and this Iowa men's basketball team. Yeah, the confidence Folgueras had to say, yeah, give me the ball, despite the fact that, as you said, David, he's been a little bit more inconsistent. At his best, he is truly the second best player on this Iowa team with a chance to be one of the best players in the Big Ten. He just hadn't done it that consistently. But over the course of the year, I mean, it doesn't matter what he did in some game against Ohio State or Nebraska. We're all going to remember the legendary shot. And Madison, it's the biggest Iowa shot, biggest men's basketball shot in a Hawkeye uniform in, 20 years maybe?
Oh, I would think so. I mean, I understand that my Iowa men's basketball history knowledge might not be completely polished over here, but I mean, I don't know how that shot isn't easily within the top 10 conversation at the very least. I mean, that's a shot that sets up Iowa. I mean, Ben McCollum has been on how many talk shows at this point today? I know he was on Pat McAfee earlier today. There was a Good Morning America video that they posted this morning on their social media account. I mean, like you were saying earlier, David, this team has just been completely overwhelmingly supported by so many basketball fans who wasn't paying attention at all to Iowa beforehand.
David, it's completely transcended Iowa basketball. It's bled into the rest of the college sports and just professional sports world.
No question. I think the big thing is people are learning who Ben McCollum was, and he is an elite coach and tactician. He is a major X's and O's factor where NBA coaches will call him and get advice. But the one thing I realized that after yesterday, obviously there was a couple dust-ups with Todd Golden and Ben McCollum, and I just wrote my column about this today, actually. He just reminds me so much of his fight for Iowa. You talk about passion, you talk about grit, you talk about heart. Is he not like the modern embodiment of Chris Street and everything all Iowa fans talk about Chris Street? Just continuing to fight for the state he loves, to come back home on a program he worshipped growing up, hearing those loud cheers in the 80s and 90s in Carver Hawkeye Arena. And now he's the man to break the curse for the Iowa men's basketball program and get back to a Sweet 16. And the only team that's in their way right now, Fred Hoiberg and the Nebraska Cornhuskers, just like everybody here predicted.
Yes,
of
as
course.
we all drew it up. You know, the only difference between Chris Street and Ben McCollum, Chris Street was jumping up and down on the baseline. Ben McCollum is jumping up and down on the sidelines.
Yeah.
We're going to have the Prairie Boys Basketball team coming up next on Iowa Live.
Yep. Todd Kuntz. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay.
Will Weir. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Austin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Welcome back to On Iowa Live. Welcome back to Pickle Palace. Thank you, everybody. The Cedar Rapids Prairie Boys Basketball team joining me. Coming up in just a little bit, we'll talk more Hawkeye hoops on our Web Extra show, but we're going to talk a little high school hoops. State tournament just wrapped up a few weeks ago, and we have our coach, Todd Kuntz, here with me. Thanks so much for joining us. For the two gentlemen holding the microphones, can you both introduce yourself, starting with you? Introduce yourself, tell me your year in school.
My name is Will Weir, and I'm a senior at Prairie.
My name's Austin Jones, and I'm a junior at Prairie.
All right, so you're coming back next year. We'll talk about the junior class coming back next year in a bit. Coach Kuntz, you started in 2023, and you're building this team up to, or you built this team up to be a contender, go to the state tournament this year, you're a quarterfinalist. What was your favorite part, or what's been your favorite part about building up with this group of guys?
Well, I think it's been really easy with the kids we've had. Just the buy-in from everybody and believing in the team effort and the team, just our team balance. One of the things I've said all year is we have champions at their role. And we've got a team full of those champions, whether it's being the scorer, being the rebounder, being the defender, being whatever we need off the bench. Everyone was a champion in their role this year. And so I think when you have that, it just makes the team really tough to beat.
Yeah, a team thing for sure. Will, I'll go to you because you probably remember the team that went to the state tournament in 2022. Tell me, I know you wanted to get that win against Hawkeyes, but tell me about your time at state, leading your guys to Des Moines. Was it all it kind of lived up to be?
Yeah, it was super fun. It was honestly a great experience. It's definitely memories that I'll keep forever. I just really wish that we could have got that game back. We were there, the entire time, within 3 most of the game, and really thought we had a nice shot at it. But it was a good time.
Yeah, and similar question for you, Austin. You grew up wanting, obviously, to one day play there. What was it like? I know you wanted to come out with the win, but what was it like against Hawkeyes and that whole week at state? Were you happy with your performance?
Yeah, I think we showed that we can play with anybody in the state. I know when we went there, everyone didn't give us a chance, and we were right there the whole time. So, the whole week was fun, and, obviously remember the game, but the moments with my teammates is what the best moments were.
Yeah, and that game against Hawkeyes was one of the early contenders for game of the week early on in the quarterfinals. A good game. What does it say about – I'll go to you, Coach. What does it say about your team that doesn't matter who's across from you, whether it's a Des Moines team, a team that could possibly win a state title? What does it say about you guys that you're competing with them from minute one till triple zeros?
Yeah, I think we certainly believe we can play with anyone in the state. I think we've shown that over the last 2 years. We had – incredible belief going into Des Moines that we could not only compete, but we could go in there and win. And I think we were resilient all year. The last 2 years, we've won a lot of close games when we've been down going in the fourth quarter. And again, it's just a group of guys who believes in each other, who trusts in us as coaches. And when you have belief in each other, you can do a lot of great things.
Will Weir, a lot of close games in the regular season. How are you able to pull them all out, or pull a lot of them out?
Yeah, just, sticking all the way to the end. That's really what it is, just believing in each other, having confidence all the way through. And those games are the most fun ones. I love playing close games, and it's an opportunity to learn and grow. And, yeah, it's just trusting each other was the main point.
Yeah, and you certainly got better and better throughout the season. Austin, what were some of your favorite parts about playing with your guys this season?
Just, always believing in each other, and there were a lot of times in the season where we were down, and we stayed together and we were able to pull out some good wins. And then just every day at practice, they're just a great group to be around, and just had a lot of good times together.
Yeah, game of the year contender I was happy to go to was your game in the sub-state final against North Scott. To get there last year and come up short, how good did it feel to take a win against the Lancers this year, punch your ticket to state at home too?
Yeah, it felt amazing. That was easily the best environment that I'll ever play in my life. Shout out to all the Hawks fans and the student section coming out. Really appreciate it. We really fed off of that energy, and it was just such a fun environment, and it was easier to play in front of the home crowd like that.
Yeah, Austin, you hit some big shots in that game. Walk me through that game for you.
Amazing. The environment was awesome, and you feed off that environment, and when it's that loud, you can't have time to really be nervous, so you just prepare and be ready to knock down those shots. And my teammates gave me great positions to hit them.
Yeah, and Coach, as you're talking to your team, you guys are down for a significant portion of the first half. What are you telling them to keep them in it?
Yeah, we've had an incredible sense of calm the last couple of years. The moment doesn't get to us, and that's not easy to do. I think that at any level that's not easy, but it's just something that's been a reflection of our entire staff, all of our kids. It makes it easy. There was times in that North Scott game, I think I said to the Gazette that I felt like we as coaches were a little more agitated than the kids were, but they've believed in each other all year long, and so I think just there was just that faith the whole time that we were going to get it done, and we had to. It was too cool of an environment not to get it done.
Yeah, Will, why or how do you have the sense of calmness that you had, that you're even calmer than your coaches? You're just like, all right, I'm going to step up and hit 3 because we're going to still win this game.
Yeah, well, practice makes perfect. I've been practicing all my life for that moment, and just, trusting in my teammates. That's another big thing, and just, keeping it cool and just going out there to win the game, and we know we can compete with anyone, so that's the biggest thing.
You, Will, are one of several seniors. I wrote down Will, David, Aiden, Colin, Furious, and Caleb. What will you remember about hanging out out with your senior class for 4 years?
It's just a great group of guys. I mean, I just love hanging out with them, being able to see them every day at practice, and those are memories that I'll cherish forever, and that's just what I love most.
Austin, you're a junior. At what point this year do you kind of take a step back and say, all right, it's our team now. It's the juniors' team now because they're going to be seniors next year?
Yeah, I mean, we had a good amount of juniors on this team, and quite a few of us played big roles, but there are some people that are going to have to step into bigger roles next year as seniors, and just be exciting to see them get even better than they have been and play with people I've played with my whole life growing up.
So, Coach, are you putting them in the weight room now, or are we still on a little bit of a break?
Well, we'll take a couple of weeks off, but yeah, I mean this last couple groups of seniors, they just really set the tone for everything that we're going to do as a program. And over the last 2 years, we won 37 games, which is the most in a 2-year stretch, tied for in Prairie history. And so I think for these guys to know that they're part of that is really, really special. And so I just so proud of every one of them.
All right, so we obviously don't want to forget about last year, but next year, really excited to coach this team?
Yes, very much so. We're going to be really, really solid next year. We got 3 starters coming back, and I think we've got some guys who are really going to take big jumps this summer, and I expect to be right back there. Well, not in Des Moines, but this time in Ames for the first tournament at Hilton Coliseum.
That's going to be awesome. Well, next year, you will have the trophy here. I'll say goodbye for now. Join us on Web Extra.
That was pretty sweet.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Cool. Thank you.
It's On Iowa Live, where we talk sports. Proudly sponsored by Ability Physical Therapy, Elite Fitness, Empowering Excellence Charter School, and Pickle Palace.
Okay.
All right, welcome into Web Extra. We're still at On Iowa Live. We've moved from KCRG TV9 to streaming and YouTube. We appreciate Madison, Hricik, and David Eickholt for coming back to join us. Iowa women took a tough loss against Virginia, 10-2. You rarely see it in the women's game, but you did see it today. And the tough part here for Iowa fans is they had this game. They had this game in their hands, up by 9 in the fourth quarter. How did Iowa lose this game? Up by 9 in the fourth quarter, and it goes to double overtime. You both were at the game. What happened, Madison?
Well, it started with back-to-back UVA triples. That was what happened. There were a couple mistakes that Iowa made defensively. All of a sudden, the Cavaliers had just drilled 2 triples, and it was just momentum had turned on a dime, and it was that quick. And from there, you could see that the Hawkeyes were starting to lose some of the confidence that they had gained from the momentum that they had built up until that point. And then as things got down to those last couple seconds, it almost felt like both of the shots that Iowa took right at the very end of regulation and in that first overtime period, that they were just very frantic. It didn't feel like I could hear the crowd basically yelling, shoot it, and it almost was like they didn't realize how much time was left on the clock at that point.
I think the offense just went totally stagnant, and there's a lack of creativity with it, because it got to a point where we've become so accustomed to seeing Ava Hine completely take over in the second half. The offense basically dumbed it down to the fact that they just waited for Ava to get position to throw her the ball, and if she wasn't open, they would pass it around the perimeter, look for her again, and then when it wasn't there was some sort of panic, and then Chit-Chat Wright, you had to force up a couple bad shots. And again, Iowa couldn't buy a bucket on the outside, so a lot of what Virginia did, they simply just collapsed in the paint and basically said, here, Iowa, go shoot the basketball. And it was a great strategy because, again, as we mentioned earlier, Iowa went 5 of 29 from three-point range. Taylor Stremlow, who has been an instrumental part of this entire kind of, I don't want to say turnaround, but post-Taylor McCabe, that's how they got their confidence back, was her playmaking ability and her shooting. She went 1 for 10 from three-point range today. And it just looked like Iowa's offense, I don't want to say it was sped up, but they just had turnovers at the worst possible time. And credit Virginia, they turned it into buckets on the other end.
Yeah, Iowa was the more physically imposing team for a significant portion of it, grabbing 20 offensive rebounds to Virginia's 6. But late in the game, I noticed it too. They just weren't very creative on offense, and it was ironic because the last Virginia possession of regulation was a steal, and it was kind of a combination of one of the best defensive possessions of the year, if not the best defensive possession of the year. Everybody got their hands in the passing lane, and it eventually led into an Ava Hine steal. And after the Jan Jensen timeout, we're all thinking, here we go, let's run this set. It looked like Hannah Stolke and Ava Hine were setting screens. Maybe they were going to try to throw it in, or Chit-Chat, right, that is, trying to throw it into Hayden. But then Chit-Chat, what did you guys see on that play where she drove in, turned around, threw up a shot that it's not exactly a low percentage shot from her because it wasn't outside the three-point arc, but you got to come up with a better shot at the end of regulation.
I think I think she waited too long to start the action because it seemed like she was still dribbling around on the perimeter with about 3.5 seconds left. And then when Ava wasn't open, again, I don't want to say there was a sense of panic, but then she drove in and then she realized basically by 15,000 people yelling her to shoot, she had to force a bad turnaround jumper. The bigger factor of that wasn't even the fact that Ava wasn't open. It just felt like there was no secondary action, and they did not even look once toward having a secondary action. So, again, I think Chit-Chat Wright would have just been better playing it out, and then with 2 seconds left, then pulling just a deep contested 3 rather than kind of that turnaround. I don't even want to say it was a shot. It was just kind of a throw in that situation.
I think it also goes back to what you and I were saying, where it almost felt like they didn't realize how much time was left on the clock, especially going into that second overtime where they were trying to get it down to Ava Hine. It really felt like that nobody really had any idea how much time was left on the clock, and that was truly just we need to get this up and try for something rather than generating an opportunity, because Iowa, for the most part, has been pretty good about going to secondary actions throughout this season. So it was definitely abnormal to see them struggle, especially in those kinds of moments. Because, I mean, we saw Chit Chat hit a buzzer beater near half court.
I was going to say probably a 50-footer.
Yeah. We've seen her just go for it. And so the fact that the Hawkeyes didn't, I think, was a big surprise, because they found success doing that, even when it was almost just kind of we need to just throw something at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, that's something that might keep Jan Jensen up at night. And the other thing that might keep Hawkeye fans up at night is 8 of 16 from the free throw line. Virginia had 5 misses from the line. Iowa had 8. In a double overtime game, you have to often point to that. I don't know how much hard-hitting analysis we could do on that, but just 8 of 16 from the free throw line, especially when Chit Chat Wright misses how many? 2?
She went 2 of 4 after the flagrant foul that they called. And by the way, I'm just going to rant for a second. It was ridiculous they did not blow that play dead. The girl had the ball in her hand. She popped Hannah Stolke in the throat. They let action go on for at least 20 seconds, and then Stolke somehow got up. And credit to her, she got the defensive rebound. And I will give the officials this: they did go back and review it and gave the flagrant. But can you imagine if they waited till the end of that play and Virginia had scored to go back and review that? I mean, that could have decided the game in itself. But, I mean, you look at Chit Chat Wright. I think once she went 2 of 4 from the line. I mean, I told you this off the record. I think that's when I knew Iowa was probably going to lose that game. And Ava Heiden, by the way, had a great look with 1.5 seconds left, and she did admit post-game that she wasn't sure how much time was left and tried to force it. But just those tiny plays that they don't have a ton of experience with, it just ultimately costs them.
Well, and they are a young team, too, at its core. We've talked about that all year long, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't reach the expectations that were maybe set for them earlier this year or this weekend specifically. And so I do think that. I will say, going back to the free throws, that one is definitely, to me, where it becomes a bit of a sore spot, because the reality is it's called a charity stripe for a reason.
Yep.
And I'm going to use a quote, or I guess a one-liner that my professor used to say to me last year was #free throws matter. Because I covered a Syracuse men's basketball team last year that was not good at making free throws, and it cost them a lot of games, and it felt like I was almost witnessing a little bit of that towards the tail end of that, particularly that second overtime.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it goes back to the other part is Chit Chat Wright's a really good free throw shooter. I mean, that was just a situation where did you think she got tired? Because the first one, I think the first miss she had on their first two free throws, it looked like it was halfway down, then just span out. But the other aspect of it is, in terms of just free throws and bunnies, how many layups they missed in the first half to where just kind of halfway in, dipped out, and then, Virginia ended up getting the rebound. I don't want to say that Virginia wanted it more, because I think Iowa's energy different from game 1 to game 2. I thought Iowa game 1 had no energy at all. I thought they had great energy tonight.
Yeah.
I just think the things that we've been worried about all post Taylor McCabe finally caught up to them, and this is the game that kind of exposed that. And I think this game single-handedly will change how Jan Jensen attacks the NCAA transfer portal here over the next couple months as well.
The numbers on chat right, by the way, 49 minutes and 20 seconds, although that's not really an excuse, because Virginia just played their third game, and it was, by the end of it, their third extra session of basketball. And if you don't even count the first 4 as an extra session. Maybe it's a conditioning thing. But I agree with you. I think some of the guards especially looked a little bit tired at the end. It didn't help that Ava Heiden was in foul trouble, and once Heiden fouled out, you kind of felt the air come out of the balloon a little bit of Carver Hawkeye Arena. Chat Wright, who's been such a good three-point shooter all year, starts missing them, and she misses those 2 free throws. I still have faith in Chat Wright, and here's why. She's been great all year, specifically with the calming presence she provides, and I think people are going to remember this because you remember everything in March. But Chit Chat Wright is going to use this. If she stays at Iowa, she's going to use this to hopefully, if you're an Iowa fan, bring the team forward a little bit, because most of the year she was a calming presence and she hit important shots both at the line and behind the arc. It was just this game where late in the fourth quarter and in overtime, she did not. Any other thoughts on this game in particular, or before we talk about the season as a whole?
One thing I will always say when it comes to season ending is the reality is in competitive sports, there's only one team that's truly happy at the end of the day. That's just kind of how it goes. But at the same time, the one game that the season ends on, whether it does end in joy or ends in heartbreak, that's the one that lingers the most. So I think to me, it's always the season ending game is always the one that starts the conversation. I think that when we look at the season as a whole, you'll see that there are some things that need to be addressed in the off season, like the transfer portal, figuring out who can they get that can be a number one shooter. But at the same time, you also have to recognize that there's still one game doesn't define this team. As much as they have proven and exceeded expectations of a lot of people throughout this year, this one game, as much as it will sting later down the line, it still doesn't define what they've done throughout the year.
I got countless good things to say about Jan Jensen, rightfully so. She's the most positive, gracious human being probably I've come across in this job. A couple things, though. One, she has to improve her timeouts and when she draws up a play to get a bucket. Time and time again this season, when Iowa needs something, it just seems like her team kind of freezes in the moment. This wasn't the only game that has kind of exposed that. And Jan's an ultimate motivator. She's an ultimate, again, positive. I wouldn't even say glass half full person. She's a glass full person. Like, that's how positive she is. She has to work on her substitution pattern, and I know why they stuck with the 5 for the most part today, because it's a must-win game. You get 3 or 4 days off. It was a tight situation. But you have to instill confidence in those younger players that they can step up and create those big opportunities. But it's a lack of execution in the clutch. I think mentally she kind of has to take a step back and kind of reset the team to get them to refocus, because the one thing about Iowa, and I'll go back to Lisa Bluter, Caitlin Clark era, is the fact that they were not the most talented team. Yes, you had one otherworldly talent who I think is the greatest women's college basketball player of all time. But you had a bunch of supporting cast who believed in the coaching staff, believed in the in the philosophy. They had that killer mentality. They could not be broken. I'm not saying this team broke mentally, but if you want to get to that level and get back to the Final Four, you have to find a way to reach down in these new recruits and this young team and extract the best out of them, probably a little bit quicker than Lisa Bluter had to do in the Caitlin Clark era.
Yeah, there's a specific identity that a lot of Final Four teams had, and by the end of it, I wasn't really sure what Iowa's identity was other than just unselfish players throwing it to their All-American post. A lot of teams that go to the Final Four, I'd say all 4 teams that go to the Final Four, all 8 that go to the Elite 8 are unselfish. I think there's that next level thing. David and Madison, is this a season of what ifs? Because I'm welcome to be disagreed with, but I don't think it is. I think by the time you get here as a 2 seed, when you were picked outside of the top 5 in the Big Ten preseason poll, I don't want to call it a house money season because the round of 32 is not quite house money territory, but it's sure closer to a house money territory than a what-if season, because think about all the great wins you did have in Carver Hawkeye Arena.
I would consider this a set the standard season. With how young this team is at its core, there's so much room for them to continue to grow. And this is especially if this group of Hawkeyes that are currently here that can return next season do return next season. Who knows what the transfer portal will bring? We never know anymore these days. But the reality is they are so young, and they have the ability to grow and learn and develop together, which in college athletics isn't necessarily the most common thing. And if Iowa can get a couple transfer pieces here and there, they have the ability to take what they've done this year and build upon it. And that's where I think it's more of a set the standard kind of season. Is okay, you've got a very young group of Hawkeyes into this world. Now what can you do to elevate that? What can you do to bring out the next step so that it does become a year where it does become a feeling of, this is a Sweet 16 team just out of the gate. Yeah. There's no hesitation about it, at the very least. It's
a little like a series finale on a television show where you have the last remnants of that old era of Monica Sonano and Caitlin Clark and McKenna Warnock and Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin, and now you're moving into some new territory here.
I think Iowa football this past year was a what if. What if Iowa gets a stop against Oregon and Mark Gronowski, what should have been his crowning moment when that 4th and goal gets in there, right? What if Mark Gronowski doesn't get hurt against Indiana? I still stand by. I think Iowa probably wins that football game. This women's basketball team, I think you have to divide up into 2 segments. One, they overexceeded the regular season, and nobody's going to convince me otherwise. They had more regular season wins than they did in any year with Caitlin Clark on the basketball team. With, again, 9 freshmen, sophomores, they were able to do that.
When you say that out loud.
In a deep Big Ten conference. They were the 2nd seed in the Big Ten championship. They got all the way there. We know what happened to UCLA. I think UCLA is the best Big Ten team of all time. I think they're that dominant. I think they're that complete. But the postseason, I think, fell short. I can't say it was a what if they got there, but I do think they did fall short of the expectation because going into it, based on all the evidence we had seen through 30-plus games of the year, every single person probably picked them to go to the Sweet 16. So you have to compartmentalize it a little bit and still appreciate all the moments they had. But like you said, March is what matters because go to men's basketball real quick. There's a few things, obviously, but what was one of the things about Fran McCaffrey and why it did not end up working out between the fan base and Fran? They did not make the Sweet 16. Now look at the hype. Now look at the national pedigree of Ben McCollum and the Iowa men's program. And that's simply because, guess what? They won 2 games in a row in the month of March. But that's the beauty of the tournament.
Yeah, it's March. It's what matters. A huge shout-out to seniors we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. Hannah Stolke, Taylor McCabe, Kylie Feuerbach, and, of course, Jada Jimfy. Feuerbach played 48 minutes. Hannah Stolke, 48 and a half minutes. They really left it all out on the floor there. All right, let's move on to some more happier times in Tampa, Florida. Madison, that's where you were, as Iowa takes down Florida 73-72. Almost an afterthought, but they were definitely playing with house money at that point because they beat Clemson in the 8-9 game. I thought that was a pretty impressive win as is, but then they have a legendary moment with Fulgaris hitting this shot. This is the most legendary shot at Iowa in men's basketball in how many years? 2, 3, 4. Maybe Jordan Bohannon in the Big Ten semifinals is one that came up. A legendary missed free throw by Jordan Bohannon perhaps as well. They're going to remember it forever in Iowa City, Madison.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, that's a moment that you don't forget. You don't forget where you were when that happened, especially for a lot of these fans that are new to Iowa, whether that's the current college students, or if it's a high schooler that might be looking at Iowa for school, or if it's just somebody who likes to watch March Madness and doesn't know anything about Iowa basketball. You watch that and you remember where you were. I know exactly where I was when I watched the first March Madness buzzer beater I ever watched. Like I was sitting on my couch in my living room with my dad at 10 o'clock at night watching, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was the Villanova buzzer beater to win the championship.
Yeah.
So you remember where you were in those moments, and that's a moment for this program because it allows them to not only set up the ability to give fans the chance to just enjoy something like this, but also it provides the fun part of March where people who have not paid attention to the school all year long suddenly join in on the fun, and they just get to they hop on the bandwagon. I don't know about you guys. Listen, we are very in the weeds with the teams that we cover, but sometimes it is a lot of fun to jump on a bandwagon when the time is right.
Yeah, March that's the thing about March. People remember your losses as they lost in March. It doesn't matter what they do in the regular season. But on the complete opposite end, you get a guy like Fulgaris, who's not only a legend in Iowa, people are going to remember him. You talk about Villanova. It took me a second to think of the names, but that's Ryan Arcidiacono to Chris Jenkins. I've never lived in Philadelphia. I don't know anything more about Villanova other than Jay Wright used to coach at Hofstra on Long Island. But those are names we remember forever. Yeah. And people who have never been in Iowa in their life know the name Paul Jesperson for his shot with Northern Iowa. And I think a lot of people across the country are going to now know the name Alvaro Fulgaris because of that legendary shot against the 1 seed. I mean, we talk about the one play, but as a game, David, Iowa really outplayed Florida, the number 1 seed.
Yeah, they did. I mean, I think you knew Iowa set the tone of physicality early on. I mean, look, if Florida got out to a double-digit lead early, I think it's a completely different game. But Iowa matched them punch for punch. And I think a very underrated play of the game, and it's so weird that I'm pointing this out, it was the very first possession for Iowa when they tried an alley-oop. When's the last time we've seen Iowa try an alley-oop on a first possession of the game? But, again, I mean this with every complimentary sense of the word. Ben McCollum is a lunatic. Like, from a basketball perspective, he is a genius. He is a competitor beyond belief. He's a master tactician. I think that was drawn up, and they did that because Florida going into that game, again, the number 1 in rebounding margin, second best offensive rebounding rate, one of the biggest front courts in the country. I think they were the best front court in the country. They tried an alley-oop with an undersized Iowa team to say, we're not scared of you. We're going to attack you time and time again, and they weren't going to back down. And I think that was echoed later on in the game when Fulgaris and Alex Condon were wrestling on the ground, and Fulgaris tried to punch the basketball, which sparked a firestorm across social media, the commentators, and the arena. But for Iowa to go in there and not back down in a hostile environment, this is the same group, by the way, that lost to Penn State on the road, that lost to a garbage Maryland team. It's postseason. I can say garbage. They were a garbage basketball team this year. But for Iowa to drop those games and to not back down against, again, the defending national champs, to break the curse that was a Sweet 16, Ben McCollum has not just elevated his own personal status, he's elevated the brand of Iowa basketball back at least a step closer to where they want to get to, I think.
Well, and I think one of the things that I really kind of enjoyed being in Tampa, getting an opportunity to talk to some fans, some other members of the media that were learning about Iowa as I was learning about Texas Tech and Alabama and all of those, was just kind of getting an opportunity to hear from them what their perspective was. And they would ask me, then, does Iowa have a chance against Florida? And I would say, well, they took Michigan down to the wire not too long ago. They started the season taking Iowa State down to the wire. Like, this team has shown that it's capable of playing in these big games. And I had said it. I was like, it would be a very difficult task for Iowa to do it. I don't necessarily rule it out. It depends on who starts and controls the pace of play. I have said that from day one. If Iowa could control the pace of play, they had a massive, massive chance of winning that game. Because if Florida was going to play the game that they wanted to play, where they were going to get out in transition, they were going to throw together 12-0 runs in 70 seconds of game time, it was going to get out of hand really quickly, because it's just that's just how Florida has succeeded in the SEC. But as you mentioned, I kind of agree with you with the drawn-up plan of just go and attack that front court, prove a point out of the gate. And, it wasn't the prettiest start on the board. But
Ruben Chinulo, playing under 19 minutes, goes 0 of 1 from the field and has 4 personal fouls. And the guy you were worried about, Thomas Houck, had 19 points, but only 3 of 11.
Well, he got 4 called fouls. We all know he got away with basically attacking the B gap on Trevin Urach to end the first half, because I don't know how they missed that. The other part, though, about the pace, really quick, is I learned going into that game, Florida was 6-5 on the season when they possessed the basketball 65 or fewer times in a game. And Iowa slowed the pace down. I was shocked that Florida did not try to speed up Iowa more than they did. Keep this in mind. Iowa beat the defending national champs with Bennett Sturts, a lottery pick, going 0 of 9 from the three-point line. And Iowa shooting not that great from the – what do you think the result is at the end of the game if somebody just said, hey, Bennett's going to go 0 for 9, but Iowa is going to be dead even on the rebounding margin? I still think Iowa gets trounced by 20. But, again, you got credit Tavion Banks, who I don't think we've mentioned yet.
No, we
Tavion
haven't.
was spectacular in that first half. And you talk about setting the physicality, Tavion Banks was the standard of physicality. He is the one who set the bar in that basketball game. So, again, for Iowa's front court, Cam Manuel's been a big glue player for the last couple weeks. To get those guys in foul trouble, to limit some of those big bodies, and for Iowa to continue to attack them, it's a masterful coaching job. And Ben McCollum and the entire Iowa coaching staff, from a game planning perspective, deserve all the praise that they're getting now. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be very interesting to see the tweaks they make, because how storybook is it, the fact that the next round is freaking Nebraska?
Ben McCollum, it's funny you said that. It's one thing written in my notes, but I do want to wrap it up on McCollum, who this season, getting to the Sweet 16, it is the most house money you can have. I've used that phrase a lot. Grade for this season, got to be an A+++. Yes. Getting them back to the Sweet 16 for the first time since Tom Davis in 1999. Clearly, it looks like, at least through 1 year, the right hire for Beth Goetz. How's Darian DeVries and Indiana doing? We hope they do well eventually, but they're not in the tournament. And Iowa, you mentioned Banks, and I think Cam Manuel is the same way. These are not necessarily Power 5 players, at least they're not recruited to be.
Yeah.
But they mirror their head coach in their toughness and their energy. And it's funny you mentioned their coach emulates Chris Street a little bit. It's just an old school full circle thing that we hadn't seen with the Iowa men's basketball team. X's and O's wise, Ben McCollum is proving to be one of the best in the country. We all kind of said that about him, like, oh, hey, this guy's really good at X's and O's wise. Look what he did in Division II, but we didn't actually see it. he just beat the number one or the defending national champs and the number one seed in Florida with just an amazing game plan.
No, I mean, the game plan was great, and you could tell that entire team believed in it. They were ready to go, and they executed it. I mean, the number of times I know that both of you have heard Ben McCollum say this, of talking about executing the scout, whether they did it or not, they need to follow it. And I mean, even after all of the excitement, all of the joy, we had asked him, what was the plan after to try and get that last stop when the game ended, after Fulgaris hit that 3 and Florida had one last chance. He had said, yeah, they needed to make sure he didn't go right, and guess what they did? He went right. And granted, it was a joke and we all laughed because at the end of the day, Iowa still won. But he's, even in that moment, he's still like, yeah, there was an element of the scout that was not completed then. And he's so committed to it, and he believes in it. The number of times I've heard Tavion Banks say that he would follow Ben McCollum to war.
Yeah.
I mean, these players would do anything for their head coach, and we saw vice versa too. McCollum sticking up for Fulgaris, during the very lengthy review by the officials after the tangle.
After the sensitive.
Yes.
After the sensitive. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, by the way, again, the talk. I called Ben a lunatic, and I was kind of joking, but like he went in front of the camera after and said, people just got sensitive. They got sensitive. And that's when I'm like, oh, we're really going down this rabbit hole. I love it. But here's the other thing that I know people are not going to want to hear, but it's probably the truth. Iowa fans are going to have to get really comfortable with the fact that Ben McCollum is probably going to be linked to other jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you have seen his stock catapult, and there's going to be potentially 3 really good jobs opening down the stretch. North Carolina, again, none of these are official. This is speculation. North Carolina, Kansas. Who do you think was going to be on that list? It's probably going to be Ben McCollum. Now, I'm fairly confident in saying he's not going anywhere because he's talked repeatedly about this is going to be a retirement job for him. But I will tell you what, if you're an Iowa fan, you have to kind of relish in it, because if these high-end blue blood programs are trying to poach your head coach, your program's going in the right direction.
It definitely is. And that's a conversation for another day. But, man, the conversation about what does Ben McCollum do if Kansas comes calling, if North Carolina comes calling, if Kentucky just lost and they're not in the Sweet 16. I'm not saying they're crazy down in Lexington.
They are, yes.
Your early thoughts on Nebraska, because we got to look ahead a little bit. Sweet 16 game, Iowa-Nebraska might be the biggest men's basketball game in either of these two states in the last 20 years or so.
Yes.
I mean, over under, how many days until the city of Houston completely runs out of beer?
I was just about to ask
1.5 days. Are they by the end of the second open practice, are they going to have any beer left in the arena?
Well, I think what we're also not mentioning here too is that when you look at just how this regional is set up, basically in Houston, you're looking at Iowa, Nebraska, and then whoever wins that game, whether it is the Hawkeyes or it is the Cornhuskers, there is a chance that they have to go and then face Illinois. So, let's just put that in perspective. Do I think that will happen? I don't know for certain. If there is a team that's going to put up a fight against Houston, it's probably Illinois. But that's basically a home court advantage situation there. So who knows? But there is that realm of possibility too. And with the Big Ten having this many teams in the tournament still, that just makes it all the more intense. I do worry about how many bars are going to be requesting.
I put out a tweet earlier, and if you're a city of Houston, just a quick PSA to you: however much Busch Light you ordered, it's not enough. Iowans are coming.
Yeah,
just forewarning. Let me go deeper down a rabbit hole real quick. Iowa's potential path to a national title. Okay. Hear me out.
Here we go.
It's Nebraska, Illinois, Michigan State, and Iowa State. I'm just saying
we're looking ahead, but it's possible.
But I just think it's just kind of a funny tinfoil hat thing. But for Iowa, I'll say this: I think if you told Iowa fans before the season they make a Sweet 16, every single person under the sun signing up, right? But now I don't know how people are going to react if they don't beat Nebraska.
Oh gosh,
I have not put that out there yet. But just because the budding rivalry, there's additional pressure. And I'll tell you what, it's a lot of pressure on Fred Hoiberg and that Nebraska team too, because what's the one thing Nebraska wants more than anything else besides probably free beer and, a great harvest. It's beating Iowa in literally anything. They just have, besides, women's volleyball. But it's going to be a lot of pressure on this game. We know that there's drama between the Nebraska players and the Iowa players. I think it's fair to say Hoiberg and McCollum have respect for each other. I don't think they particularly like each other. But this is going to be, I think, one of the best Sweet 16 games, at least in both men's and women's tournament. I cannot wait for this basketball game.
Well, there were people on Twitter and on Blue Sky or whatever social media platform you choose to use that were literally saying, basketball gods, we do not ask for much in March Madness, but give us this matchup. I mean, and this was like while Iowa Florida was still going on. This was like, this wasn't a like, oh, there's 2 minutes left in the game, let's see if this happens or not. This was a like, there's 15 minutes left in the second half and people are asking for an Iowa-Nebraska Sweet 16 matchup on social media. This is something that everybody that has any inkling of what this rivalry is, they want this because they know what this means to both schools. And with the stakes that much higher, I mean, we talk about how much fun March Madness is. Like, come on. Like
the matchup everybody really wanted to see was Fran McCaffrey versus Fred Hoiberg in the opening round, and they robbed us of that. Just saying.
It's crazy to think
the
about.
The Franwich and the Hoiberger 2.0 in 2026.
Iowa and Nebraska. Iowa had not been to a Sweet 16 since 1999. Nebraska had not won an NCAA tournament game in their history, and one of them is going to go to the Elite Eight, and possibly, I'd give it maybe a 40% shot.
Yeah.
They're going to play Illinois for a chance to go to the Elite Eight. And that atmosphere, by the way, in Houston is going to be crazy because you've got, just to put the bracket in front of you guys, Houston and Illinois, the 2-3, that's one matchup, and then the winner goes to the Elite Eight. Then you have Iowa and Nebraska. It's in Houston. Houston fans are going to be crazy. Illinois fans travel quite well. I think a lot of folks nationally might know Nebraska and Iowa as the Big Ten West schools, the schools that play 7-6 and punt a lot in college football. And no, they're not basketball schools. I don't think people are claiming that Nebraska and Iowa are basketball first schools, but they're fan first schools, and I say this all the time for Iowa and Iowa State fans, and I could probably say it for Nebraska fans. You can put a game on the moon and you'll have people show up and going crazy. I think the atmosphere is going to be more like an English soccer stadium, like a Man City, Man United game where you're going to have like fights in the stands. It's going to be so crazy.
Nebraska, I've taken a couple pot shots in Nebraska, but one thing cannot be debated. They are so fiercely loyal. They travel everywhere. Their sellout streak for how many years of mediocre football over the last decade. Nebraska fans continue to show up. And that's something that they take great pride in. That's a very well-funded athletic department. They completely took over Oklahoma City. I have a really strong feeling they are going to be a heavy, heavy presence in Houston. I think a big wild card is who are the Houston fans going to cheer for?
That is a good question.
Well, if you're Houston, you kind of play a physical cage match type game. So I think you probably want to play Nebraska because look at what Iowa just did. They competed with Florida in a physical cage match type game. That's me. I got to ask a Houston fan friend of mine. Your final thoughts before we get out of here, Madison, on Iowa men's basketball. And I know you're excited to cover them in Houston in the Sweet 16.
I mean, I landed from Tampa at about 8 a.m. this morning, and I am leaving in about 14 hours to head out to the Sweet 16. I mean, I think I've told this to you before on this show, but for this to be my first season covering a team, I am 24 years old. I have the coolest job on the planet. I could not be more excited. But I think what makes this so fun is that I can see how much fun the players are having, how passionate McCollum is about getting this and making this a reality for people, and at the end of the day, how much fun the fans are having. It was so fun to look over at the Iowa section after Fulgaris hit that triple and just see how thrilled everyone was. I mean, that's one of those, when you think of just like incredible March Madness shots that you think of forever, like that's one of them. And it was so fun. It's the one shining moment for Iowa that we know of, at least at this point. Who knows what could happen, but I'm more than excited to get another opportunity to cover this team.
I think I would just tell Iowa fans probably relish it. I mean, this is something that they've been begging for, I think, desperately. And you talk about a program that I think for the last 3 or 4 years has been completely apathetic. And I think Ben McCollum knew that when he took over the job. And his first, shtick, I won't say shtick, but his first focus was to re-inspire the fan base, get them to buy back in. And I think that win to put him in the Sweet 16, it's a potential program-changing win because you talk about donors, you talk about fan excitement, you talk about NIL. That's the era we live in. You talk about, upgrading, Carver Hawkeye. All of these things are possible when you show that there's potential for the program to take a big step forward. And now everybody in the country, not just Iowa fans, not just media people, you're talking about national pundits and coaches are telling you, look, you have one of the most elite tactician coaches in the country. Not in college basketball, in the country at any level. Take advantage of that. Don't abuse the loyalty that he has shown to have throughout his career. Continue to invest. And now moving forward, I think there's plenty of reasons to be excited. And I'll tell you what, if they beat Nebraska, it might be a little bit early, and they joked about last night, there might be a legitimate governor race between Kirk Ferentz and Ben McCollum.
Madison Hricik from the Cedar Rapids Gazette. You're heading to Houston, you said, tomorrow?
Yes.
So everybody keep up with Madison's work. Where are you going this week, David? Where can people read your work? What are we looking at?
Yeah,
here?
so, I'll probably be doing a lot of podcasting here. Sean Bach and Elliot Clough from Hawkeye Insider are going to be flying down to Houston tomorrow as well. So just stay locked into HawkeyeInsider.com, the podcast, the Swarmcast, our YouTube page, all that fun little social stuff. I just appreciate everybody for continuing to stay locked into Maddie's nice coverage and obviously the great coverage here on KCRG.
Well, thank you, David and Madison, for joining us. One shining moment. It's all on the line. Sweet 16 between Nebraska and Iowa coming up. You also have Iowa State over in, after winning in St. Louis, they're playing in Chicago. They're going to take on Tennessee. We've got it all covered for you on KCRG TV 9. For now, I will say we're out, and we will see you next Monday night.